Hi everyone, this is Michael Tomer, also known as Acts as Buffoon. My blog is actsasbuffoon.wordpress.com if you'd like to stop by and say hello. Today we're going to be going over how to set up sharding on MongoDB 1.6. I'm not going to bore you by trying to explain to you why MongoDB and sharding are awesome. Odds are if you're watching this, you already know all about why they're great. So I'm just going to get right into how to set them up. Now, if you're at all like me, you've probably gone to the official MongoDB website and looked through the documentation and found it to be a little intimidating. You know, for instance, it's pages long, and at times it can get a little opaque, like this chart here. We can see we've got MongoDB processes, MongoS, we've got config servers. How do they all work together, and what are they supposed to do? Well, I was having a bit of a difficult time with it until I found this excellent blog post over here on the Snail and a Turtleneck blog. Here's the URL of the post if you'd like to come by and read it yourself. And Christina basically did an excellent job breaking this down and explaining how all of these various components fit together through movie buff terminology that I can fully understand and appreciate. So I'm going to read back a brief piece of this for you. It's exactly how the Mafia is structured, or at least how The Godfather taught me it was. The shards are the peons. Someone tells them to do something, e.g. a query or an insert, they do it and report back. The Mongos is the Godfather. It knows what data each peon has and gives them orders. It's basically a router for the requests. The config server is the consigliere. It knows where all of the data is at any given time and lets the boss know so that he can focus on bossing. The consigliere keeps the organization running smoothly. So that said, let's go and actually get this set up and running. First off, we're going to get our config server, or the consigliere, up and running. Now, for the purposes of this screencast, I've got 3 separate servers set up on Amazon EC2. In order to communicate more clearly about what's going on where, I'm just going to refer to them as servers 1, 2, and 3 from this point on. So here on server 1, I'm going to run my config server. You run that with MongoDB just like you would when you're running a regular MongoDB process, but with the config server argument. Now keep in mind that normally MongoDB would store its data by default in the data/db directory. A config server is actually going to, by default, want to store its data in the data/configdb directory. So you'll want to go and create that directory if you don't have it already. So let's run that. And we can see that it's up and listening for connections on port 27019, and it's got a web admin interface on 28019. Next, we're going to get our MongoS server up and running. That's the Dawn in this case. So you run that with MongoS and passing along a configdb argument, and that is pointing to basically the server that we have running here in our top window. And I should point out that this is also on server 1. So you would think I could pass in localhost as the argument here, but you do not want to do that. Basically, MongoDB does not like to mix localhost with real IP addresses. And when you start trying to add sharding servers later on, you'll get errors. So make your life easier and just use full IP addresses when specifying the configdb. So we'll run that right now. And you can see that not only do we now we have the MongoS instance listening on port 28017, but we also had a whole flurry of input take place over here on the config server. So now we've got those 2 pieces set up. Now it's time for our henchmen, the shard servers. So here on, I've got servers 1, 2, and 3 set up to run each of these. You run that with MongoDB and the shard server argument. So let's run that on each of these. So that's server 1, server 2, and server 3. And we can see each of these are listening on their respective ports. So there we go. We have the actual servers up and running, but the shards aren't actually communicating with the config server right now. So we have to set that up over here in the Mongo shell. So this, right now, I'm SSH'd into, once again, server 1 over here. And as a brief side note, I don't really know if it's a good idea to run the config server and the Mongo S server on the same box that you're running an actual shard on. If you're thinking about doing it, you might want to stop by the MongoDB IRC channel and try to figure out what the consensus is. It works, I will tell you that, but I don't know if it's recommended in a production setting or not, so FYI. Anyway, here I'm just going to use the Mongo shell to get into the admin database on the Mongo S server instance. And of course, in this case, it's okay to say localhost because this isn't part of the actual configuration for anything that's going on. I'm just shelling into it. You can use the IP address here just as well, and that'll work. All right, now I've got a couple commands that I'm going to cut and paste in there. First among them is the add shard command. Add shard does exactly what it sounds like. It's going to tell the config server how to, well, basically it's going to tell them that these shard servers are up and running and that they're ready for use. So the argument is pretty simple. Basically, it's db.run command, add shard, and then the IP address. Optionally, you can put a colon here and specify a port if you're using a non-standard port. But if you're on 27018, then all you need is the IP address. So, okay, as you can see here, the shards have been added to the Mongo S instance, so it knows about them, but that's not enough. We still need to actually enable sharding on the database, so let's go ahead and do that right now. So in this case, once again, very simple, just db.run command, enable sharding, and then the name of your database. And since I am so unbelievably creative, I've come up with the highly original name, ExampleDB. So there we go, that worked. Sharding is enabled, however, sharding still is not quite ready yet. Let's go over here and copy over the last command. All right, so here this one is, the command is db.run command, shard collection in the namespace for the collection. In this case, it's exampledb.example collection. And you also have to pass along a key. The key is what Mongo is going to use for its consistent hashing. In this case, I'm using the ID key. It should be noted that the key that you use here is the only key in the collection that can have a uniqueness constraint on it. So that's a little bit of a trade-off. But I mean, as you can imagine, if you had 70 shard servers set up and you went and added in a new document, then Mongo would have to look through all 70 of those other shard servers in order to figure out whether or not it's unique. It would be a massive drain on CPU cycles and I/O and all of that. So it makes a lot more sense to just say that the key used here is the only one that can be unique, and I think that's pretty reasonable. So let's run that. And there we go, we're all set. So we now have all of our servers set up. We've got our config server, our routing server, and our 3 shards. And we've got everything set up in order to actually make sharding work. But why take my word for it when I can actually show you? So over here, I have set up a simple Ruby script to go and just fill the database up with some random data. In this case, it's a very simple script that is just going to go and insert 10 million records into the database. Each one of those records is going to have 3 keys, foo, bar, and baz, with each one of those having a value that's just going to be 1024 random, a 1024 character string. And you can see that I'm accessing this perfectly normally. I'm not doing anything special in order to make my script aware of the fact that sharding is enabled. I'm just telling it to connect to the MongoDB server on localhost and to use the example DB, and then here I'm telling it that the collection is the example collection. So literally no modification to your scripts is required to get sharding up and working, which is amazing. So let's go and run this script now. All right, so the first thing we can see is that over here we've got some movement over here in our server windows, in our shard windows, as some data is coming in. And so what's happening is that data is being sent from my script. It's being intercepted. It's going directly to the Mongo S instance right here. This is then going and checking with the config server to figure out where that data should be going. And in this case, it's I would say it looks like it's probably going to server 2 right now because we have this insert right here. And then basically as each request comes in, the config DB and the routing server are going to keep figuring out where the data should be pushed to. Eventually, once it gets to a certain threshold, it's going to start pushing that data over to other shards. So let's take a look at the, I've got the monitoring, I've got the web admin interface pulled up on each of these. So if we go down, we can see all of this here. This is for the config server. This is for the Mongo S instance. This is for server 1, or shard 1, I should say. And we can see that we do have here a 128 megabyte chunk was set up to store data on shard number 1. This is shard number 2. We can see that this one also has a whole bunch going on here. So presumably this has at least another 128 megabyte chunk. Yep, there we are. So another 128 megabyte chunk was set up there. And maybe even another one down here. Yep, we're now up to 256 megabytes on this server. And over here on shard 3, we've also got a 128 megabyte chunk. So data's being distributed across these various shards completely effortlessly from my perspective as a programmer. And believe it or not, that's actually all there is to it. So, like I said, feel free to go and check out my blog. I'll be posting this video there shortly, and stop by and say hello if you found it useful. Thanks.